Good evening, Canes fans, and welcome to the third episode of the Rod The Bodcast. I'm your host, Jordan Betts, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mike May. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great tonight. A great Monday evening here. Recording a little late, 8:50 start time over here, you know.
First period of the Stanley Cup Finals. Looks like Tampa's already up 1-0. I don't think we're surprised by that.
Yeah, let's just hope this one's over in 4. I'm just ready for it to be over.
Yeah,
honestly.
Crown the champs. Let's get this moving on. I'm tired of hearing about the Canadian media and how I listened to a pod today. And hey, Montreal's earned their way here. Carey Price has played great. The team's doing unbelievable things. They fought through a lot of adversity. Upsetting Vegas was huge, but man, I heard a pod and they were basically saying these are two evenly matched teams, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I don't know.
Couldn't be me with those takes, but thank you for joining us again tonight. I think we're going to feature our first ever, we're going to call it Turtleneck Time, which is basically trying to get into the mind of Don Waddell, the Carolina Hurricanes president and GM. This will be a reoccurring theme, but something we're pretty excited about.
Yeah, I think it'll give us a different perspective. We like to look at things from a fan's perspective a lot. I think we really got to sit back and think about the management side of things, which is a little colder, a little more business-like. Not a little more, a lot more business-like.
Yeah. I think that's a really good assertion because, as much as I may enjoy watching Dougie play, we've talked about him a ton, but for the Canes just to have a bottom line number and say, hey, we can't cross that, that's how business works. That's how your job probably works. That's how my job works. Like, we understand that. And as fans, it's hard to distance ourselves from that reality, but it's the truth. Hockey's a business. It's the Patriot way. It's getting rid of a guy 1 year too early instead of 1 year too late. So we're going to try and think like Don Waddell tonight. But before we get into that, Mike, what's this news I'm hearing about the outdoor game?
So it sounds like, based on what has been released, the Canes don't have an outdoor game next year. It sounds like it's Minnesota, Nashville, and then there'll be a Canadian market team in the works. But no Canes outdoor game next year is what it's looking like. We're hearing that there will be one in the future, even though it's not next year, but it's kind of frustrating for the fans. We've been waiting a while for this now. We're excited about it. We're just going to have to wait a little bit longer, it sounds like. Yeah,
it's not a little. It's immensely disappointing. I remember this February, forget the exact date, but it was a beautiful sunny day, perfect cold, would have been awesome. And that opportunity was obviously taken away because of the coronavirus. But I really was looking forward to Carolina being the first Southern or East Coast Southern team to host one of these outdoor games. And it just feels like, once again, when it comes to Southern hockey, the league's going to defer to Nashville. They're going to defer to Tampa. And it kind of felt like that way when they were scheduling the playoff games and the timing of the playoff games in that Nashville series. I don't think we want to rehash that. We're not going to be those bitter Canes fans. But this is disappointing because I was also looking forward to the opportunity to see those leaked jerseys, which, when I first saw them, I was iffy about them. What'd you think? They kind of grew on me, though.
I like them. We talked about the sleeve was probably my least favorite part of that jersey. But overall, I mean, I thought they were pretty clean. They went with the logo on the front that they have on the black helmets. I liked them. We'll see how close they are to what was leaked. And I mean, now we'll probably have to wait until the 2022, 2023.
Yep, 2023, probably winter.
Yeah, winter of 2023.
Early that calendar year. Now, let's do it. We alluded to it previously. Let's go into our first T-shirt or turtleneck time. T-shirt Blues
Clues mail time coming in right now.
Hopefully our excellent producer, Steven, can maybe develop a drop for this at one point, maybe akin to Blues Clues. I hope not. I think we're a little more professional than that.
It's a little jingle.
As we jump into this, remember, we're framing it like we are Don Waddell. You have 29 $3.4 million of cap space entering the offseason. That's with Jake Gardner on the roster. And I think we can assume he will either be LTIR'd or removed in some capacity. That's going to free up $4 more million. So right now we are looking at UFAs, Dougie Hamilton, Peter Mrazek, Jordan Martinook, Cedric Paquette, Brock McGinn, James Reimer, and Yanni Hakanpää. RFAs, Andrei Svechnikov, Warren Fogle, Jake Bean, Alex Nedeljkovic, and Morgan Geekie. Based on the apparent Facebook post from Jordan Martinook's dad, we can cross him off that list.
Yeah, so it's sounding unlikely.
Peter Mrazek, likely gone. Warren Fogle, lots of trade rumors, and there's a strong sentiment that he will be out the door. So what's that leave us? If you are Don Waddell, it's your turtleneck time, Mike May. Tell me how you are building this roster, given that you're likely going to have roughly $33 million of cap space this offseason.
Well, I mean, you look at it from the list that you just read off, and I'll really quickly touch on them. Peter, I think it's highly unlikely he's back with the Canes. That's a guy that wants to be a number one goaltender.
And he's probably earned that, right?
And he's absolutely earned it. He's going to recover from his thumb surgery over the offseason. I would think he's going to want 3.5 to 4 million in that range over some term. It's not going to be in Carolina. So he'll have a new home most likely this coming offseason. I think that's best for Peter. I think that's best for the Hurricanes. Martinook, as you alluded to earlier, his dad posted on Facebook essentially saying it was the end of his time in Carolina. I thought that was bizarre that he did that so early in the process.
What we know about Jordan Martinook and, him wearing a letter and being an integral part of this community, kind of weird timing but that his dad came out and said it. And, we're just going to operate under the premise that that's true. I'm a little shocked it didn't come straight from Martinook himself. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense for where the Canes are at from a cap standpoint to pay, albeit a versatile player and a leader in the room, $2 million to play on your fourth line.
Yeah, you can't have multiple $2 million guys on your fourth line. It also frees up a letter. I think Aho is deserving to wear a letter full time now. I think we're going to see that happen next season, as we saw it happen when Slavin was injured.
It's time.
It's about time for that to happen. The next guy on the list we have here is Paquette. I don't see a spot for him.
That kind of bleeds into the same conversation to a lesser degree as Martinook. You just can't pay your fourth line that much money. So he's going to be gone. However, the other guy, and I don't think we really consider him a true fourth liner. He's played in that role. Heck, we've seen him play on the top line. I think Brock McGinn will be back, whether it's a $2.5 million deal. He's been on a 2x2? But he's roughly that deal. But he just brings so much to the Canes lineup. He embodies what Rod Brindamore believes a Hurricanes player should be. Does a little bit of everything, and actually had a really good year. I know he got off to a torrid start scoring goals, cooled off a little bit, but he is what Carolina Hurricanes hockey is. I would be shocked if they let him get out of the room. What do you think?
Yeah, and so he was 2x2.1, and I would think it's going to be similar. I don't think his values change that much. I think it's a guy Rod Brindamore absolutely loves. I think it's a guy that plays in your system really well. I think between the 3 fourth line players we just mentioned, being Martinook, Paquette, and McGinn, it's hands down McGinn is the guy I want to keep, especially come playoff time. I'm a big McGinn fan. I like the way he plays. I think that's the kind of grit you need in the bottom half of your lineup. It would be surprising to me if he doesn't come back. It's just a question of does the money work or not. I think
sure. If he's looking for something maybe in the 3 range, maybe it's a different discussion. But for now, I think we can at least we anticipate him being back. And as I said, compared to those other 2 guys, he just brings a little bit more well-roundedness to his game, a little bit more upside. And, he's been here. He's part of the core. He's Rod's guy. He's going to be here, in my opinion. Next on the list is James Reimer. I think we have him as a maybe. And the way I would phrase it, and you may disagree, I think you will agree, we're going to bring in a veteran goalie that can succeed in this system in that $2 to $2.5 million range, whether it's James or it's someone else. Your thoughts?
Most likely, yeah. And like you said, it'll be Reimer if there's no better option. I think Reimer, and honestly, Reimer could go somewhere else. So, it might not even be our choice. Like, he could go somewhere else and we may be forced to find someone else. I could see the Canes spending a little bit more potentially, as we saw on how we ran Mrazek and Reimer together, both in the $3 million range. I could see another $3 million guy potentially. I think this is a spot where you maybe look to earn back a little bit of cap and cut your goalie costs. Part of that, which we'll talk about in the near future here, is the Nedeljkovic deal. Where is that hash out? I think that kind of plays a factor into what you're looking at for your backup goalie or your 1B.
The last UFA of prominence is Yanni Hakanpää, acquired at the deadline in a trade with Anaheim for Hayden Fleury. I really like what he brought to the table. Doesn't bring a whole lot offensively, but he did score a couple goals. Physical presence, body guy, actually skated better than I anticipated him to. I didn't think he was a liability. I think he's kind of the perfect bottom pairing right shot D-man that you can probably get on a low deal in the $1 to $1.5 million range. He's Finnish. He fits the culture. Fans seem to grasp onto him, seem to really assimilate well to the room. Kind of a no-brainer move if he wants to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's a really good 6-7 guy for the Hurricanes. I think he's a guy you could definitely have in your bottom three. We had a small sample size with him. We'll see how, if he comes back, I'll be curious to see how he progresses in the system. I liked what I saw. With that being said, there's so much potential movement on the back end. We're going to kind of have to watch it as it all unfolds and see what moves the Canes need to make as a result. We've got with the expansion draft coming up and your Hamilton contract looming. We got to just kind of see how things go. I would be happy to have Hakanpää back. We brought in Jelena as well, and I see him as really a minor league pull-up seventh defenseman that gives you a little bit of depth and an older guy that you would think would be.
You can throw him out there on NHL ice, and he's not going to be overwhelmed. He's not going to embarrass himself. Can play the game.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned Dougie. We're not going to rehash that whole thing, but I think it's a good jumping off point to get us to the RFAs, because specifically the other big contract is the Svechnikov deal. And I think for this exercise of turtleneck time, we're operating under the premise that he signs a bridge. And we have it labeled as 2 by 6 by 5, or do you have him at 3?
I think it's probably 2 years, $6.5 million.
I tend to agree with that. And he's just going to bet on himself, and he'll be a free agent again at 23 years old with the opportunity to sign probably an 8-year deal at that point through his age 31 season. I think that makes too much sense for both sides. He's going to be a Hurricane probably for his entire career. He's Tom Dundon's first draft pick, number 2 overall in 2018. He's the future of the team. If the team's going to win a cup, he's going to have to be the guy. He's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to see an 8-year deal. I don't think the Canes have even come close to closing the door on that negotiation. We'll have to see what it takes from his agent's perspective to get an 8-year deal done. I don't think it's likely, just because his agent is going to want him to do the 2-year.
Yeah, it was widely reported before the start of this season, and albeit he did have a bit of a down year, but his camp had turned down a 8-year times 7.5 annual. Yeah, we both kind of thought that he wasn't signing anything that didn't start, with 10. Maybe that's a little lower now. I'm not sure what the Canes' appetite is, especially with all their contracts coming up at the end of the 2024 season, that they're going to really extend that much. So I think a bridge just makes too much sense. It aligns with kind of where they are contractually with a lot of their guys, and it gives him an opportunity to, probably get a little bit more pay to where he should be aligned with the market, and an opportunity to jump off in 2 years to get a really big payday.
Yeah.
Makes too much sense.
Yeah, and I like giving the 8-year deal later in the
make him show
stages.
a little more.
Yeah,
as much as we believe in him.
Yeah, you give an 8-year, when they're 21 or something, and you're looking at 29 years of age. I like that. I like the contracts running into the early 30s, because when they're 31 and the 8 years up, you have a smaller window of a career left, whereas when they're 20, like the situation we're at with
kind of
Dougie right now. Exactly.
Svetch could almost, if he signs an 8-year now, he could almost double dip and expect at 29 years old a contract that runs through his age 37 season. And I'm not sure at that point, even as much as we love him, and hey, he may be a multiple Hart winner by that point. Who knows? Hopefully. But that's a scary deal to sign till someone's like 38 years old, 37 years old. I think this avoids that. I think it gets him to 31, and maybe you're talking a 4 or 5 year deal. Great. Makes sense for both sides. This is probably the correct trajectory. Speaking of trajectory, a guy that's trending in the opposite direction, doesn't seem like he's long for Raleigh, is Warren Fogle. The rumor mill is hot around Fogle right now.
Yep.
His camp is upset. Apparently thinks he should be playing higher in the lineup. His time in Raleigh may have run its course. Tell us what you're hearing on his end.
Well, I mean, if ultimately it comes down to wanting more opportunity somewhere else, there's not much you can do about that. It's not like the Hurricanes or Rod Brindamore is just going to say, yeah, you know what, since you're worried about where you're playing in the roster, we're just going to move you up the roster. That's not Rod's philosophy. That's not many places' philosophy, if any. And I get it. If he wants to maybe be a power play guy more consistently, if he wants to be a guy that is playing top 6 minutes, like that's his right. If that's what he wants, the likelihood of that being in Carolina is slim. He's going to really have to earn it.
Yeah, he may have spot starts there based on injury, but the truth of the matter is they got 6 guys at least, if not more, slotted ahead of him in those roles. And Warren has flashed. He came on the scene. He made the team in 2018 when he probably shouldn't have. Had a great postseason. I kind of agree with Adam Gold's take on Warren that if he would play with a little bit more edge, animosity, feistiness, use that big body and kind of lean into being the villain, that would be a good, pivot for his career. I'm not sure he's ever going to be that guy. Instead, he's more of a middle 6 forward that can play on the kill, can maybe give you some second power play unit time, but just lacks a little finish. He has skill, but just something is just missing. He's missing a little additive to get him over the top. Maybe his camp feels that if he gets into a different role in a different system and has the opportunity to flourish in that top 6 role, that he'll become that guy, and maybe that'll be a payday for him. I just don't see that being on, it's definitely not here in Carolina. It was probably not for a contender either.
No, not likely. And I'm a Warren Fogle fan. I like his game. I like a lot of the dimensions to his game. But like you mentioned, the fact of the matter is we see Warren Fogle put himself into some really good situations, and I've noticed his deking and specifically has gotten much better since he came in. He played very rushed early in his career, and you started to see that rushed be more accurate now, where he was beating the defender, or when it was 2 guys and he would split the defenders. You were seeing him pull off the moves that his brain was telling him to do earlier in his career that just weren't falling through. But now it's the last piece of the puzzle is now finish the play, make the pass, or score the goal. And he's gotten better. The question is, does he have that next level to where he can be a guy that consistently gets you 20 plus goals and 35 plus assists? Like, can he be a 60 plus point guy? And it's tough to know. He's 25 years old. I don't see many contending franchises where he's going to be in your top 6, how's he going to play playing on a lesser team? He might be one of the guys that plays really, really well on a team that loses more frequently, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, could you see him being a low-end William Karlsson, like, coming out experience, maybe not in a Seattle, but in like a Buffalo or something like that, where just gets thrust into a role and, all of a sudden it clicks. And you alluded to it a little bit with, how it seemed like he had all this ability, but there was a little bit almost like baby deer to him, like on the ice. Like he had these great thoughts, but it kind of wouldn't come together. And hey, I get that. I've been there. The game has seemed, when I was playing professionally, the game would seem fast to me sometimes. And you finally reach the point in your career where you're able to kind of slow it down. It's clear he's reached that.
Yeah.
And I think him and his agent and probably his family feel that he deserves more of an opportunity to feature that, because there's no doubt that he is one of the more skilled guys. I mean, it really shows up more on his one-on-ones with the deking and creativity. To me, it comes back to finish. But hey, if he was in a different scenario, if he's in a Buffalo and, Jack Eichel's gone and he's playing on the top line and, he's one of your premier wingers, I wouldn't be shocked if he potted 25 and maybe had a high 60s, mid 60s, high 50s performance in a season in points. That wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. I just think for Carolina, one, he's never going to get that opportunity other than in spot starts, but it makes his RFA contract really hard to negotiate because he feels like there's probably more out there for him. And I'm just not sure. Well, hey, it's our decision at this time. It's turtleneck time. I know I'm not paying a number that starts with 3 to Fogle because I feel like he's replaceable, and I might have guys, Jarvis, that can come in on the cheap entry-level deal that can kind of replace that third-line role and maybe offer me even more scoring upside and skill.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, the decision also partially comes down to desire to be in Carolina, right? I think it's really tough to build a contending team with players that aren't totally bought in. And I'm not saying he's not bought in, but, if he doesn't want to be here and the numbers don't make sense for him, I think he's a guy that will have continued success in the league. I think he's a guy that could potentially become a second line regular. It's just he didn't beat out Niederreiter, and
he got passed by Natchez. Yeah,
he had the opportunity to beat out Niederreiter, and he didn't, and he got passed by Natchez, which was something that was expected. So it's just not likely in Carolina. I mean, you look at next season, the top 6, there's just not a spot for him. And it's just the reality of it, that he might be a guy, like you mentioned, that moves up and down the lineup when they need a line shakeup. But I mean,
when you're icing your best lineup, he's not in your top 6. And no. Hey, we're going to treat him like he's a Carolina Hurricanes player until he's not. It's very much looking like he won't be. But if he is to move on, if he is to get traded or signs an offer sheet somewhere else, like, it's a guy you wish nothing but the best for. Came in as a guy that wasn't supposed to make the team, total grinder, laid it on the line, had some really good playoff performances. We're not giving him his well wishes yet, but hey, he's a guy you root for, and there would be no animosity out the door, at least on our end as fans. Pivoting to Jake Bean, and Jake Bean's the conversation's a little more nuanced to me, because I believe if Brady Shea is protected, Jake Bean is exposed in the expansion draft. And we'll talk expansion draft a little bit more later, but more so into next week. I think Jake Bean is the selection for the Seattle Kraken. I think that, to me, I've heard Fogle could be the call. Maybe if Niederreiter is exposed, which I'm not really sure unless they really just wanted to clear cap space. I think Brady Shea earned his roster spot during the playoffs. There's no way to me that former draft pick by Ron Francis, Jake Bean, isn't in a Seattle jersey if he's exposed. But for now, we're operating under the mindset that we're looking at like a $1.5 million deal to be a bottom pairing defenseman that will hopefully, grow into his role into Carolina. And maybe be the power play quarterback to replace Dougie Hamilton? Is that kind of what we're thinking right now?
I mean, I think you'd hope that Bean becomes that guy. Like you mentioned, the expansion draft really throws a wrench at RFA and UFA negotiations. I know a lot of organizations have expressed the desire specifically for UFAs to leave them unsigned prior to the expansion draft, which makes sense strategy-wise. When you look at the RFAs, his is weird. I mean, I'm not totally sure that I think he gets taken. I think it's definitely a good chance if he's exposed, he's taken. I think if you have Warren Fogle, Jesper Fast, and Jake Bean all exposed, I think ultimately what it's going to boil down to is who are they getting from the other teams. Because by the time they've made that decision, they're gonna know basically who they're taking from everyone. The question is he a guy that fits, or are they gonna look for a guy like potentially Jesper Fast or Warren Fogle if they're available? I could really see them taking any of those three guys if they're available. I think they will be. If you bring Jake Bean back, it's probably a 1-year deal.
Yeah, would it be that dissimilar from the RFA contract Hayden Fleury signed?
Probably not much.
But Hayden Fleury did have more NHL experience. Yeah. Granted, I think maybe at that point the ceiling was deemed slightly lower, but I don't know. Some of the shine has worn off since February, March for Jake Bean as well. I mean, he was looking like a no doubt protect guy, and now we're sitting here very much feeling like, at least me, I'm anticipating him being gone.
I would like him to not be gone personally.
Oh, I agree. I just think that's where it's trending.
Yeah, and I hear you on that. My thing is he's had such a small opportunity in the NHL, and I do think that ceiling is still very high in my opinion. I think he's a guy that's shown flashes, and he's a guy that I think once he gets really comfortable at full speed in the NHL, his vision is great. His puck movement is great. He's going to improve as a defender. He needs to improve physically, and that's going to be up to him. To me, it's just
the physicality thing.
That's going to be up to him if he improves in that regard or not. Does he want to be that guy, or does he not want to be that guy? I think.
Yeah, if he's not going to, if he's not going to,
defenseman easily.
I agree with that. To me, it unfortunately maybe doesn't fit the window as much because that's probably at least another year away. But I think you can put him on your bottom pair. And as he grows into that role, I hope at least next year he won't be a liability versus better opponents, because he was exposed, especially in that Tampa series. Nashville did kind of the same thing, was very physical with him, and he struggled with it. I don't think the pairing with Hakanpää's like the worst thing ever, because they can kind of balance each other out. But he's got to be able to stand up for himself a little more, especially, board battles in the corner. And, he can't just get, bullied off the puck. Was it Johansson or Duchesne that basically just one hand lifted him and then they scored a goal right off it? And I think in game 4, it was not his finest moment, but he's a guy that you want to bet on the upside. He's a player that was developed by the team, drafted by the team that, I think we envision him being part of the future. It's just, to me, if they're set on losing Hamilton, which we still tend to think that's more likely than not, how do you not protect Shea? Because you can't lose 2 of your 4 best NHL defensemen. And yes, there's a cost savings there, but that really, in my opinion, takes you out of the contender category unless you're bringing in some. But it's not a great free agent class, and we've always had a hard time bringing high-end guys to Raleigh.
Yeah, and I've kind of told you this. My opinion on it is I think if the team is added to, it's going to be made mostly through trades. I think if the team has to replace Dougie Hamilton's value, I think it's going to be through trade. I don't think it's going to be done through free agency. I think generally teams that usually get hit by bad contracts. I like to think a lot of them come from free agency.
Yeah, free agency is generally bad. No
you
doubt.
look at the Hurricanes and you look at all right, we're looking at Jake Gardner. That one's not one you love.
We like Calvin Hahn. That one was shipped out quick.
Yeah, like we haven't done well in that regard of taking the chances and winning.
And those were deemed pretty low, good team friendly signings. And now we're looking at them like, oh man, that's we got to get that off the books. My one
there is another
critique is I don't mind building through trades, but it's almost a double whammy because not only would you be losing a Hamilton and losing a Shea, but then you're giving up assets to replace them. Well, and then it's not a 1-for-1. And that's the scary part. And although the Canes have a deep pipeline, they used to have a deep pipeline of defensemen too. And now we're sitting here going, where's the depth?
Yeah, well, for me, there's nothing you can do about losing one guy to the expansion draft, right? So there's nothing we can do to stop that from happening. It depends who they want to.
Yeah, I don't think they need to give up an asset to do it either. That was shown to be a foolhardy exercise. Vegas totally leveraged that and obviously won. Beat the league and taking all these side deals.
It works. I think we did the same thing though, because ultimately the Van Riemsdyk trade was ultimately like, hey, don't take one of our guys. We'll give you a second in the Van. So like,
yeah, we might have been one of the few winners, but in general, Vegas beat the league, and it's shown with what was that 3 conference finals appearances in 4 years.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you can find a way to potentially make a trade where you're giving up an asset that allows you to protect Shea and Bean, I think that puts you in a really good spot because we have plenty of forward depth, and like you mentioned, our pipeline doesn't look as fat as it used to. So I would be concerned if we lost Hamilton and Shea, like you mentioned. I would be concerned if we lost Hamilton and Bean. I would be concerned, like in pretty much any scenario in that, unless we make moves. And I think we're due for moves, but we're not going to see
At what cost will you take Warren Fogle?
Yeah.
Well, but before we get too far down this tangent on the expansion draft, let's gear back towards the RFA conversation. And we touched on it in a previous pod. We both feel like the Canes, at least for the first time and in a long time, feel like organizationally they have their goalie of the future and the present. And that's Alex Nedeljkovic, and guy that was, placed on waivers. Big asterisk there, unique year for waivers, but earlier this year and emerged as the 1A and was the day one playoff starter and, had great playoff performances other than really the game 1 versus Tampa, the week goal versus Gaudreau, I believe. But he's a guy that you finally feel like you can build around. And contractually, I think we're both feeling it's likely to be a bridge. Hasn't played enough or won enough to merit a contract similar to Jordan Binnington, although the career trajectories are similar. I'm feeling like this is 3.5 over 2. We'll revisit it later.
Yeah.
Hopefully he continues to build on his performance this year and truly prove that he's a front end guy in the league.
Yeah. This one is one of the ones that I do think it's going to be a 2-year deal, and I do think it's going to be in the $3 million range, like you mentioned. At the same time, as a goalie, he has the potential to go out and fetch something that's maybe 4 or 5 years long. He has a little bit of negotiating power because of his RFA status, but not as much as you obviously have in a UFA window, but he can negotiate a little bit. So we'll see what he wants. I think we're going to see a lot about what he feels about his potential. Based on what I've heard from him in interviews, it sounds like he's a guy that really believes in himself.
He's a great interview.
Oh, he's a great interview. And he thinks about himself as a number 1 goalie, and he wants to get better. So I think he's going to take a shorter term because he believes that he's only going to get better. And, I'm totally fine
I'm
with
here
that.
for it.
I'm totally fine with that.
I think we'd like if he was 3 inches taller, but the guy was great this year, and we loved his performance, and I think we both believe he can continue to grow into the role. The last notable RFA that we need to touch on is Morgan Geekie, a guy that has been in and out of the lineup, really flashed, talented guy for a fourth liner, the role he's been inserted into. Play a little wing, more of a natural center. A guy we like he's going to be in the low ones range. Mm-hmm. A kid that has actually been floated as potentially being exposed for the expansion draft. I'm not sure he would merit selection by Seattle. Give me some thoughts on Morgan Geekie and his place within the hierarchy of the Hurricanes lineup.
He's a guy to me that I like a lot. I think there's room for him to grow, obviously, just like everybody has room to grow. I saw a little more fire come out of him as the season went on. He started to get a little more confident in his physicality and his forechecking. I think he has a long way to go in that regard. I think his skating needs to improve a little bit. But, the guy's obviously got a laser beam for a shot. He's a cheap fourth line option that can score on the fourth line. And I think if he nails down that checking responsibility, and then you add to that the shot that he has, it makes your fourth line a threat. And I think that's a good aspect to have on it.
Yeah, probably needs, if he's going to play in a fourth line capacity, needs to display a little more, sandpaper, a little more edge, physicality, as you were alluding to. But, a kind of guy that can probably play up a little bit in the lineup, can be a spot starter on the third line, give you a little scoring juice. He's been knocked for his skating, but I don't think it's been that apparent that he's a step slow. He's skilled enough and thinks the game well enough that he puts himself in good positions to where, he always seems to be, at least especially in the offensive zone, in the right place, scoring areas. He gets that. And I'm not sure, we talk about needing finishers, and I'm not asserting that he's the finisher they need, but if they could get a high-end skill guy that understood the value of going to those areas like Geekie does, I think that could be a game changer for this lineup.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we'll see how he progresses. I think he'll likely be not likely. There's a good chance that he'll be a guy that's exposed in the expansion draft. It depends. It really depends who the Canes want to protect. You could.
Hey, it's turtleneck time.
Yeah, it's turtleneck time.
Who are you protecting?
So personally,
are you going 7-3-1 or are you going 8-1?
I'm going 7-3-1 for sure. 7-3-1. The obvious number one, Jordan Staal has to be protected. That's because of the movement clause. Yep, correct. Because of the no movement clause. You protect Aho. You protect Teravainen. I personally think you protect Niederreiter and Trocheck.
Agreed.
I think after that, I'm probably leaving Jesper Fast unprotected. I'm protecting Lorentz. Then
did you say Svetch?
I haven't gotten there yet. I keep right now. Spencer Smallman, counts in this roster. He's obviously unprotected, and then really it boils down to Geekie or McGinn, and I'm thinking McGinn, honestly, as a guy that you protect. He's a UFA, so he could be a guy that you don't protect with the plan to re-sign him post-expansion draft.
I think similar to Dougie, if Dougie was to sign, I think both of those guys will be left unprotected.
Yeah.
And then would sign, day one they're eligible to post expansion draft. I think the only thing that I would maybe change in, I know this is one of the more highly debated aspects of this, is I would protect Fast. I would let Lorentz be unprotected. I think there's a value to this team to having proven NHL guys, and that's a really team-friendly contract. So that's maybe the one thing. And, I could even argue Geekie over Lorentz, but those guys are pretty similar to me. But other than that, I really agree with the forwards that you're protecting. I don't know how we could ever leave Nino exposed. I know that's been floated in some capacity, but if they want to, keep this window open, and hey, he's prone to getting hot and cold, but he's coming off a great year, and we don't need the cap savings that much.
Yeah, I'm a big Lorentz fan. I like what he brings, and I think that his game's only going to grow. If you leave Brock McGinn unprotected with the thought in mind that you have a deal worked out already, you plan to sign it post-expansion draft, I'm fine with that. In that case, you protect Morgan Geekie and Andrei Svechnikov, Then you leave Fogle unprotected. You leave Paquette unprotected.
I wouldn't be shocked if Fogle was dealt that night or dealt before then. It just seems like the steady drumbeat is kind of telling us he is more than likely gone. How would you do the defenseman? Because I'm on record as saying I would protect Slavin, Pesce, and Shea. Would you protect Bean or Shea? That's really the decision,
Dude,
right?
I go back and forth on it. So, the way Shea played in the playoffs made me say, okay, I can get behind this a little bit more. It's just, it really depends on what the trade market looks like. What is the likelihood that you lose Dougie and Shea and you find replacements? If Don is looking in the market and he's like, I have trades that I think I can make that will benefit the team, make the team a more likely winner, then okay, then maybe you leave Shea unprotected and you take the chance on developing into the guy that you drafted him to be. If, based on the phone calls he's making, there's nothing that he's looking at it like, what are we going to do on the back end? I don't have options. Then you have to protect Shea. And that's the reality of it. So that's something we're going to know a lot about what Don thinks the market looks like come July 17th when they have to submit their protected list.
Sure. And that is the toughest question. And I thought Brady Shea was noticeably better this year than in his brief stint, with the bubble and right at the trade deadline where we barely got to see him. And I didn't love that trade at the time, giving up a first. And I'm not sure he, especially in the flat cap, world we live in now, not sure he's worth 5.1.
He's on 5.25 right
5.25. And this kind of goes in juxtaposition to kind of how I phrased things last episode and talking about viewing small sample sizes. But as I acknowledge he was better this year, he was noticeable and was a focal point in the playoffs. I don't want to double count that, but if you are pretty sure you're losing Dougie, I'm not sure you can go in the next year not having 3 proven NHL defensemen. I wouldn't hate the cap savings. If I knew I was keeping Dougie Hamilton, I'd feel much more comfortable exposing him and bringing back Jake Bean and playing the upside game and taking that 5.25 and, hopefully repositioning it and getting another, middle pairing defenseman to, stay home and play with Pesce and that kind of have a lockdown pairing on a better cap number. To me, maybe that's even the better way to play it. But once again, I think the reoccurring theme of this offseason is everything is so predicated on the Dougie Hamilton decision. If Dougie's back with this team, it allows you to play a different way. If he's not with this team, you're going to have to play another way still.
Yeah.
And it's just ensuring the requisite talent level is kept and hopefully surpassed to make sure this team is a contender next year and continues to build. Because if they lose that guy and then Shea's out the door, or you let Bean get selected in the expansion draft and he hits his ceiling, all of a sudden the low budget Tom Dundon, we're going to win every deal thing, if we regress next year, it's not going to be viewed the same way. It's not going to be viewed, oh, guys take deals to stay in Carolina. It's like Carolina doesn't invest in the team winning. And hey, they built up a lot of collateral this year. winning the Central and spending to the cap, but you got to produce, you got to win. And it's a big gamble to let one of your best, 3 players, at least analytically, one of the top 5 defensemen in the league, leave. And so that's why, to me, the discussion, although we don't want it to necessarily, will always come back to what they do with number 19.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I have a little bit different opinions on it. I think it's not the end of the... I think the Canes will be fine regardless of the Hamilton situation. Do I think that it's going to change the dynamics of the team? Absolutely. We're not going to play the same way if Hamilton is gone. That's a given. You're going to have to find replacements, and you never know who it could be. You don't know how, if Jarvis steps up and is in the lineup next year, who knows? Who knows what you have in that guy? That guy could be a guy that ends up having a 50, 60-point season out of nowhere. You don't know. That is a guy that has a very nice toolkit, and we're just going to have to see when he finally makes his NHL debut, where's he at? From his small sample in the AHL, the dude showed that he knows how to get points. Like he's proved that he understands how to play the pro game. We'll see.
Well,
it's tough.
Yeah, let's kind of conclude this discussion by we started off by talking about how Don Waddell has $29.4 million in cap space. Based on how we framed the UFA and RFA discussion and the numbers we provided, so this assumes McGinn is back, Reimer or an equivalent is back, Hakanpää is back, Svetch signs a bridge, Fogel's gone, Bean, Ned, and Geeky are all back. That leaves the Canes with roughly 10.5 mil, but you need to add 4 more. So it's going to be 14 once Jake Gardner is moved or put on LTIR.
Whoa.
So with 14 point something mil, Dougie is up in the air. So anywhere from 7 to 9 available to get removed. The only glaring need in that roster that we've built is one of the wingers on the third line, who could be Seth Jarvis on the cheap. That still gives you the flexibility with that cap number to bring in a few impact players, make some moves and flexibility. If Dougie's not a part of that, obviously you have more, resources at your disposal to make things happen. But to me, and I'll keep saying it, it's not necessarily Dougie. It's just making sure the team has the requisite level of talent to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I think they're gonna. I think that they're aware that if Hamilton is gone, that they're gonna have to find a piece, and I think there are pieces available on the market. I think they'll get it done. I think they've proven their track record so far is that they've made the right moves. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a very interesting offseason for all of us to sit back and watch. If you have like the roster that we've looked at, like you just alluded to really quickly, if you have Svetch on the $6.5 million bridge deal, you have Aho at 8.46, you have Teravainen at 5.4, Niederreiter 5.25, Trocheck 4.75, Natchez on his rookie deal. 2
stacked top lines.
2 great top lines. Jarvis on his rookie deal if he comes in. You got Stahl at $6 million.
Let me start on Jarvis. At least I do, I believe you agree with me. He'll probably make the team next year because I can't see the Canes letting him go back to juniors again. Because for those that don't know, if he doesn't make the NHL roster, he doesn't go to the AHL. He goes back to juniors. So I think he'll be on the team next year, or maybe even traded,
or start on the team, or traded.
Play the 9 games. I think he'll start in the league, similar to what Natchez did. 2018, where he played 9 games. They're going to get a look at him. If he can stick, he'll stick. If not, they will send him back. But sorry to cut you off. But
no, or they'll play him and break it and send him to the AHL. Because if he plays.
Yeah, you're right.
If he plays enough games, and then they can send him down to the AHL. But I think if they bring him in, if he makes the team out of training camp, I think he's on the roster for the season. Then you have Foss at $2 million. McGinn, we'll say 2.25 for now, but I think it's going to be probably closer to $2 million. We'll see how that shakes out. Lorentz is on his rookie deal. You got Geeky back, around $1 million. Slavin's still at 5.3. Let's say Hamilton is at 9 million, whether it's a short term.
Yeah, put on the 9 mil.
And then you got Shea at 5.25, Pesci at 4.025. We'll say Bean and Hockenpower at 1.5 each. Ned's got 3 million, and then your backup goalie, you allocate 2.5 million. That may be more.
How much caps that give us?
That leaves you about 5.5, a little less, 5.3.
You can bring in a Barclay Gaudreau to take geeky spot. You can be creative and bring in a little bit more sandpaper and make this more of a quote unquote playoff team.
I mean, you can flip a Niederreiter for a Tarasenko.
A finisher, more of a true finisher.
You can do that, and then you still have about $3.3 million in cap space. There are options.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you took the time to break that down for us, because I think at the end of the day, it shouldn't be doom and gloom. I don't think there is anybody really doom and gloom around Canes land right now, but we have that Dougie cloud hanging over us, but you just showed it. I mean, at 9 mil, even at the short bridge deal that we talked about a ton last episode, even at that high cap number, the Canes can have the flexibility to make some really impactful moves to establish the fact that they're not only going to remain a contender, but they can get even better into next year. And I think with our inaugural Turtleneck time, I think we've done a really good job of, at least you in this last little portion, showing that this team is still trending very much in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. There is... I know, we know there are players that we like that are going to leave this window, and it's been the first time that we've had a team that's won consistently. So you get more attached to players as you win more consistently. So you hate to see a guy like Martin go. You hate to see a guy like Fogle go. You'd hate to see a guy like Dougie Hamilton go. It's the reality of this type of
winning has a cost.
Winning culture. Yeah, you're winning, and you either can pay them or you can't pay them, or they've outgrown their role on the team. And that's the reality of hockey. And, it's a good position to be in as long as management makes the right moves. And only time will tell. We can sit here and talk about it all we want, but you never know. We'll see what happens.
As we've talked about, this is a, brain dump exercise. We're going to throw ideas against the wall and debate them and try to reach a conclusion and make educated comments to, try to encapsulate where the team is going, how they're trending, and how they can continue to get better to maximize this current window of these core guys. Mike, I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights. And, as we get out of here, thank you guys for joining us. Mike, please tell them where they can find us.
You can follow us on Instagram at the Rod The Bodcast and on Twitter at the Bodcast. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, like, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on. We are on, but not limited to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening, and don't hesitate to reach out on any platform.